Welcome, folks. We're going to be working on the Module 2 assignment here tonight. We have an ample amount of time to do it, so we should be able to get through it, pretty reasonably quick here. I'm going to read the description. We'll look at the sample program run, and then we'll try to take a good look at what the problem is and how we might solve it, and then we'll start coding it. All right. All right. So here's the description. You're hosting a surprise birthday party for a friend and you want to hire a local restaurant to cater it. You sent out invitations to the attendees and asked them for their dietary restrictions, right? Write a program that helps you decide which restaurants you can order from. Here's the list of available restaurants and their dietary accommodations, right? So you can see we have a column for restaurant, whether they have vegetarian food, vegan food, or gluten-free food, right? I will tell you that most of you are on the younger side here, right? And you probably don't worry about any of these things, perhaps. It's like, I'll eat anything, I don't care, right? And that's fine. But sometimes as you get older, you make conscious choices to not eat meat for certain reasons. And sometimes you find out that your body can't tolerate certain things, like gluten is one of them. And I find it very interesting. Some people do this consciously by choice, not because they have to. Other people do it because they must to stay alive or just stay healthy, right? It does become very challenging when you go out to eat and you have any sort of dietary restrictions, or better yet, standards. It becomes very difficult to find places to get good quality food, right? And especially if you have dietary concerns, because very often you buy something that you think is vegetarian, like French fries at McDonald's, and they're not. They spray beef juice on them, by the way. So you should know that. Don't order the fries if you're a vegetarian, or a vegan. Or that like gluten, which is basically a byproduct of wheat, is in a lot of different foods. And so kind of a little bit of a lesson there, aside from just the coding. But if you look at these restaurants and look at the menus that they offer, some restaurants are very accommodating to dietary concerns. Some of them are like, whatever, go down the road and get a salad or whatever, And what this list is just a grid, right? And I don't know if this is based on actual research. I think it's relatively accurate, actually. But if you were to go to the Thunder Bay Grill and you're a vegetarian or a vegan or gluten-free, it's like, well, you're pretty much not eating, you can order the steak and then just not have the roll with it, I guess, or, something like that. Marco's Pizza does not have vegan options. Cafe Mana accommodates all of it. India Kitchen doesn't have vegan stuff and doesn't have gluten-free stuff, and Harvest Cafe can accommodate all of it. All right, so what we have here is a chart of yes nos, or think of it as true falses, right? A bunch of true false content here. And it says no, people without certain dietary restriction may still eat at the restaurants, then accommodate the restriction, right? Just because you eat meat doesn't mean you can't eat at a vegetarian restaurant, is the point. In other words, if no guests report any restrictions, then all 5 restaurants would be acceptable to order from. But chances are, like, even if I polled this group, there's probably at least one vegetarian, there's probably at least one person that avoids gluten, et cetera, right? And like, once again, sometimes it's a choice, sometimes it's a restriction. All right, so here's a sample program run. We're just going to ask these 3 basic questions. Is anyone a vegetarian? Is anyone a vegan? Is anyone gluten-free? Notice we're just looking for a yes, no response, right? And they just type Y or N as their response. Then depending on what they type, we'll do a comparison of all 3 of those criteria. We'll match it up to this table up here, and then tell them what restaurants they can eat at. All right, sounds pretty simple, really, right? We got to start with prompting. Let's go to Visual Studio and let's just get a program going. So I'm going to create a console app here. This is the Module 2 assignment. And this will be version 1, and I'm going to call it original. And then we're just going to go ahead and create. I'm going to get rid of all the junk in here, and then I'm going to start building it. I do have pre-configured code, and I know you guys are going to be scrambling to kind of keep up. but that's okay. There are some efficiencies you can garner, right? So I'm going to do a prompt. And of course, this is going to happen 3 times. So I'm asking if anybody's a vegetarian. Then I'm going to ask or capture the information. I do want you to notice I'm putting a question mark there. Why, do you guys remember why we do that? If we don't, what if they don't type anything? It could crash the program. We don't like to store null values and strings. So putting the question mark there helps to keep it from failing, basically. We will have to prompt 3 more times or 2 more times, right? So we're going to ask vegan, and then we're going to ask gluten-free. I have these pre-configured. You guys could just copy paste this and tweak the language, right? And change the variable names. Mine are all set to go. So I'm not going to waste the time typing them again. So here's my 3 prompts. Right. Notice that we are expecting from the user to get text. They're going to type Y or N. So if you're wondering why I have at the end of the console read line 2 lower, what does that do? Converts it to lowercase. What if they have their caps lock on and they type a Y or an N or whatever, right? Converts it to lowercase. Then when I do my if statements, I only have to check for lowercase letters. Otherwise, I have to write like if veggie equals lowercase n and veggie equals uppercase n or veggie equals uppercase. I want to write all that code, right? That gets too complicated. So converting it to lowercase has me only checking one value. That's the advantage. All right. So hopefully you guys are getting caught up there. All right. Next, I'm going to put a message on the screen. This just mimics the output that we saw in the example. And it says, you may order from the following restaurants. This is just the 1 line of text. And then I'm going to run a bunch of if statements to generate the rest of like the restaurant outputs. All right. So here's where we're going to start to look at that chart again and try to figure this out. Okay. So let's go back to that chart. And let's just start with like what I think most people would answer when they got these questions, right? So you get the invite, and then you're supposed to say, hey, is anybody a vegetarian? Is anybody a vegan? Is anybody gluten-free? And most of the time, most people are going to say no, 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 right? Most of the time. That's pretty normal, especially in a place like Wisconsin, right? So I might write an if statement to capture those 3 values, right? And I want you to think about this. If somebody answered no to all of those questions, which restaurants could they eat at?
All of them.
Yeah, all of them, right? You could eat all the restaurants if that's the situation. So I might write code like this. And I think most of your brains are thinking this way, which is why I'm gonna just drop this in here. So I'm gonna write an if statement, and I want you to notice how I'm putting it together. If veggie equals no, and vegan equals no, and gluten-free equals no, right? They answered no to all of them, which means basically they'll eat anything, right? Then let's get our curly brackets in there. And then what are we going to put on the screen? We're going to list all the restaurants, right? And then I want you to notice, I noticed in the output, and maybe you guys did too, that the list of restaurants is indented. That's a tab. So in my code, I added a escape sequence for a tab. And I'm going to give you guys a second to catch up. Does this make sense, though? Yeah, for sure. It totally makes sense. And right, they answer no to all of them, so you can eat all the restaurants. That's fine. Right. And we can do this. Then we can say, and I do want to do an else if here. And then what's the next possible scenario? So this is where you start like kind of breaking it down. And it doesn't really matter what order you're doing it in, but here's how my brain thinks. You know, I looked at the chart originally and, no, 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 right? So that was my first if statement. Then I think maybe my next if statement will be yes, no, yes. See my thinking? Right. I'm just kind of like moving down the options here. So, and then notice veggie would be yes, vegan, no, gluten free, yes. So I can do a little bit of copy pasting on this, right? So I could just take this statement, copy it, drop it in here, and then what was it? Yes, no, yes. So this would be yes, no, yes. And then I would still need to look at that table to see which restaurants fit that scenario. So which of the restaurants don't have basically vegan options but have the other ones. So now I'm like information gathering here again. And instead of like kind of bouncing around, I'm going to do this. I'm going to screenshot that table because then I can just look at a more efficient screenshot instead of bouncing around. Kind of like this, so we can look at the code at the same time. And so, all right, I highlighted it, which wasn't good, but whatever. All right. So clearly Marco's Pizza would fit in there, right? So I could copy Marco's Pizza and throw it in there. And then which ones don't have vegan? Well, India. Well, hold on a second. Right. Well, if they're gluten free, I can't do India Kitchen. Well, it looks like Cafe Mana doesn't matter. Like I could do this one. So like I'm thinking backwards here. I don't know if you guys are catching this, right? So this is like the trick to this exercise is if someone says yes to vegetarian, you have these four options. We got four yeses. If they say yes to gluten free, I got three options. So how many options do I really have? Three, right? My options where both veggie and gluten free are yes is Marco's, Cafe Mana, and Harvest Cafe, right? So I already have Marco's there. Then I would add Cafe Mana and Harvest Cafe. And these are all real places too. You guys know that, right? In Waukesha County. Okay.
I did not know that. I haven't tried any of these places.
That's okay. you don't have to. I've tried all of them actually. Um,
Which is your favorite?
um, oh gosh.
Marcos was cooler when they had free movies next door.
Yeah. Marco's Pizza actually started out on like 51st and Center Street or something. And that's where I first got pizza from them. And yeah, long story. But which is my favorite? That's really a hard call. In principle, I'd say Cafe Mana because I think they have good quality food, but I have mixed feelings about it. Maybe Harvest Cafe, I guess. I go with if I have to pick a favorite. But I do like Indian food, but that's not my favorite Indian restaurant. And I'm recording this. I shouldn't say that, right? All right. Sorry, YouTube. We're doing restaurant reviews now in the middle of code. All right. But that made sense what we did here, right? So now if we go to the next scenario where somebody might say yes to all the veggie options. So I could copy this statement, right? I could put that here. And then we would say yes to all of them? If that's the case, what are our options? Well, Cafe Mana and Harvest Cafe, right? And I'm showing you that, I mean, there's a lot of code being created, but a lot of it's copy paste. All right. So that covers that scenario. All right. Is there a different scenario we haven't covered yet? Well, yeah. Well, there's this one where it's a yes, no, no, right? So here comes that one. So I'm just going to paste it in. I have it already typed up, but you can copy paste and just adjust one letter. And then I want you to think about this real carefully here. And let me get that screenshot back up. If somebody's vegetarian, but they're not vegan and they're not gluten-free, where can I eat? Well, the answer is everywhere but Thunder Bay Grill. Right? You guys see the logic of this now? Or at least what I'm going to say, the supposed logic of it. Okay. Is there another scenario we haven't touched yet? And this is where it gets a little tricky, because what I've been doing so far, and I want you to think about my problem solving technique. I have this chart and I just matched the stuff that was in the table. So I did one that was no, no, no. I did one that was yes, no, yes. I did one that was yes, yes, yes. I did one that was yes, no, no. Are there other possibilities that I haven't even tried yet? Yeah, there totally are. In fact, with two options on three different things, how many permutations are there? This is a math formula, by the way.
8.
Somebody said 8.
9.
You're really confident of that?
That's what I think. 8.
Okay.
Squared.
Right. Let's consult the AI on this one. Pick an engine. ChatGPT. All right. ChatGPT. How do we express that as a question though? This is always the question that you have with an AI. How do I ask the question correctly? Caleb, you sound pretty certain.
How many combinations are there in a set of 3?
A set of 3 true falses.
Many combinations are there in a set of 3 true false possibilities? I'm not sure what word to use here. Let's see what it comes up with. Okay. All right. And notice that, and this is a little thing, right? True, true, true is like yes, yes, yes. Right. And yeah, right. And then we have yes, yes, no, yes, no, yes, yes, no, no, yes, no, 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 yes, yes, et cetera, et cetera. And really, and I'll ask it, can you convert the TF stuff to yes and no? There we go. So you see like what I'm doing here, and I'm not having it write my code, but I'm having it help me. Yes, indeed, there's 8 possibilities. And do you notice that there's actually a formula for that? Right? It's like a permutation thing. But how many statements have we written so far? I got 1, 2, 3, 4, meaning I'm missing 4 of them. But I think I made it all the way through the table. You see, like, so I'm using the table as a guide, but the table's not really a good guide because I can get answers that fall outside of that. So what happens, and yes, and I hate to be doing this, is Yeah, there are 4 other possibilities. Yeah, and this is homework, so you guys are going to have to code this out yourselves. Here they are. Right, I have them pre-typed. These are the other 4. All right. So all the different permutations are now covered. So I got 8 statements. All of them have a different combination of no's and yeses. But all scenarios are covered. If you were writing it, you could do what I did with ChatGPT, right? And one thing I will put in the chat for you guys, right? Like if you want to code this out, just make sure you cover all those scenarios. All right. Not exactly giving you the code, but it's kind of like giving you the answer key, sort of. All right. Here's another concept to think about here. Should there be an else to this statement? Is there any scenario that we're not covering here? That your brain should say, we're covering all of it.
Why not? If it's
Yeah.
not, why not?
Yeah, well, that's really the answer, right? If somebody doesn't type Y or doesn't type N, they're being snarky and they're being a problem. So you got to have a way to accommodate them so your program doesn't crash. And what I put in mine is this. I just said, else, maybe you should just make something at home. You know what I mean? If you're such a problem, we're not going to feed you. All right. And I know some of you are maybe trying to screenshot me or whatever, but I did give you the yes, no chart in there. And it's really just a matter of like putting the N's and the Y's in the right places and covering every scenario and then matching it up to the table to get the right restaurants. All right. I think what we should do here is we should try this and see if it's giving us the right responses. All right. One way we can check the responses, of course, is I have that screen capture of the table and I can look here and see if it's correct. And I wish I hadn't captured it with the highlights, but whatever, it is what it is. So I'm going to go ahead and run it. All right, zoom in just ever so slightly. Is anyone attending the party a vegetarian? Yes. Is anyone a vegan? No. Gluten-free? Yes. And that's the scenario in our household, by the way. Everybody in the household's a vegetarian except for me. And my wife is gluten-free and I try to be gluten-free, but I cheat. All right. Does that work out with the chart? Right. Well, then you have to kind of look at the chart too and go, all right, we have vegetarians. So all those are in play. We have gluten-free. So all these are in play except for India Kitchen. So it's Marco's Cafe Rana and Harvest. Right. And that's what you have to do. You have to run it and then check the chart. Ideally, right, as a programmer, you can't trust that all your scenarios are correct. You got to test every scenario. So that little chart I put in the chat, you should type in every one of those and then make sure it matches up with the output. Cumbersome, I know, but when you write computer code and there's branches in the code, different selections you make, you got to test every one to make sure it's okay, because at some point it might hit. Right? Cumbersome, but that's the thing. And believe it or not, there's entire careers in programming for people that just test other people's code. How about that for a career path? And guess what? When you're coming in on an entry level in programming, that's often what they make you do. Okay, here you go. Test these programs. We'll talk to us tomorrow. It's kind of like that, right? The other thing that they do, which is kind of interesting, and so this is kind of a teaching point on top of it, is code can also be tested with code. So there's a whole thing that you can do where you write computer code that tests computer code. So instead of you sitting there typing in all the possibilities, you write computer code that does it for you. And then you just look at the results. Pretty fascinating stuff, right? I know you guys are riveted by it. I know that this program works correctly because I'm copying my old code. So I'm going to kind of exit out. But I want to do an alternate build of it to show you that I wrote way too much code to solve this problem. And I think what you'll see as a result is like, oh my God, that was so much easier. Why didn't we do that in the first place? Right. So follow with me here. I'm going to go ahead and close my solution. So I'm going to redo this again, basically. It's going to do a new project, new console app, all the same steps. This time I'm going to call it the same thing pretty much. Module 2 assignment, and we'll call it alt. All right. Go ahead and create. Get rid of this junk up here. And some of what we did, we can reuse, right? All right, so here's how I did it last time, right? When I did the revised version. This is the revised version. I'm predefining my variables as characters. Why? Because I only want one letter coming in, right? I don't want 2 letters. Really, a character is a better choice. So I'm just setting those. These are not initialized yet. There's no values being put in. Then I'm going to go through and do my prompts. The prompts are identical, except this time I'm not declaring string variables or declaring variables. The variables are declared up here. Same prompts. Okay, everybody's good? Maybe it's worded a little differently, but it's basically the same thing. All right. One thing that I guess I forgot to do is I didn't put this in, which I think is helpful. I want to describe what's going to happen next. But now I'm going to go to my if statements, and I'm going to solve the rest of this logic now with, I'm trying to count the lines of code I have here, 2, 4, 6, 8 lines of code to get the same solution. That took me, and here's my cheat sheet from before, took me all those lines of code. I don't know, what is that, like 40 lines of code, something like that. 50 lines of code to get a solution. So how can we actually hotwire this? All right, here's part of the trick to this, right? And this is totally a logic thing. There's 2 restaurants on the list where it doesn't matter what the person types. Those will always be on the list. Right? Which 2 are they?
Cafe and
and harvest.
yep.
I'm doing the Python approach here again. We don't need to. All right, so that's going to be Cafe Mana, right? And the Harvest Cafe. So I can just list those. No if statements are needed. Okay. All right. But there are some that do have limitations. And instead of trying to ask all 3 questions all the time, maybe I'm not using the right approach. If I look here, Thunder Bay Grill is a no, right? So the only way that one will pop up is if people type no. right? And if that logic is true, then is it not also true that for Marco's Pizza, it'll only happen if vegan is set to no? So I don't need to check for vegetarian. I don't need to check for gluten-free. I just check for vegan. It's not even an else if, I just do an if. And then if that's true for that one, then there's another one that's got two of them, which is India Kitchen for vegan and gluten-free. So there's the revised code. This is all of it that works. So just want to kind of show you, and I'll run it to prove it if you'd like. But the point is, when I look at this solution here, right, and we followed a sound process. I mean, we went step by step. We figured out the permutations. We figured out all the possible if, else, if combos, but we didn't see what was really obvious in the problem solving process, that two of the restaurants will always be on the list and I don't need to check for them. And we were checking for the scenarios where it wasn't really a problem, right? And if it's not a problem, you know, whatever, but we can just run these much simpler if statements and come to the same conclusion. I think this is really fascinating when you do the problem solving process. So like if somebody says, well, my code works, so it's okay, right? And it's like, yeah, sure, it works. So you got the right answer. Is it the best solution? Well, then that becomes arguable. If I can accomplish the same effect with significantly less code, isn't this a better solution? Yeah, totally. You know, I like to think of like a real world example of it. You know, it's like, hey, that pizza is not gluten free, but you just pull the cheese off the top and get rid of the crust, and now it's gluten free. You know, we got a really easy solution, right? And that, you know, frankly, people that are gluten free do stuff like that, right? Or do you know people that ordered a burger without the bread? That's the thing too. All right, so that's the alternate solution. And notice we did it in 20 lines of code, and that's with breaks and comments in it. So I'd call that a better solution. But either one, I want you guys to play with this one. This is kind of an interesting problem. So you were doing all that typing following me before. And you know what? It was a rite of passage. You got to practice your typing skills. And then you see that the solution's a lot simpler. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop this video here. That we'll call that a solution.